Okay, we're kicking things off with Vicki McKenna and Culture Cast. Vicki, you're at work today? You talk show hosts do actually work occasionally.
Believe it or not. Believe it or not, I'm actually on the job. So forgive the sort of chaotic background here, but in the studio.
Nice to know that you look good in white. We would never have known from your woman cave back home. So,
well, I would have normally worn OD green, but I'd forgotten that we were doing this podcast today. So I thought, darn it, I wish I would have picked a traditional camouflage.
Well, now it's going to be chronicled forever, and I suppose we shouldn't be surprised by our topic, the logical end to which all this critical race theory has been pushing us is now we have a school in Chicago that has decided they're going to implement race-based grading systems, which means that if you're white, you have to come to class, you have to turn in your assignments, and you have to behave. If you're not white, you don't have to turn in your homework, you don't have to come to school, and if you don't behave, well, there's nothing we can do about it. So here we now officially are segregating Americans along the lines of race.
No, it's worse than that. It's actually telling an entire group of people, have no ambition, don't try, don't work, don't do any of the things that are part of the success sequence. In the United States, it's really hard to fail. And here we have now the school system saying to one entire group of people, Black people, that not only are you being discouraged from accessing the success system that will allow you to compete and become a reasonably successful American, but we're telling you that if you do that, that somehow that's racism. And we're telling, so essentially think about this. You're going to tell every Black kid, don't try, don't succeed, don't accomplish anything. Meanwhile, the white kids who are going to have to work harder and the Asian kids who are going to have to work harder are actually going to be even that much better at accessing that success system and that success sequence, that you're going to continue to perpetuate the ever expanding claim of systemic racism. Meanwhile, you're not helping Black kids. You're just going to essentially doom them to not having the ability to even, compete on the most basic level to become a successful American. It's pathetic. You've got to hate Black kids to do this.
Yeah, I think what you said before is exactly correct. So you've got white liberals who are telling Black kids to stop trying, while forcing white kids to work harder, which is going to make smarter and more achieved white kids who will then go farther in the country in terms of wealth, which just proves how racist we all are, all because liberals think that Black kids just can't do it.
Exactly. It is a liberal conceit that Black children and Black people are never going to be able to actually, as I say, access this sequence of choices you have to make to become a successful American, that they're not capable. This goes back to Margaret Sanger, who had wanted to cleanse the population of Black people because she believed that they were intellectually lesser. How is this any different? You can't compete, you poor thing. We're not going to expect anything of you. We won't call your failure, but it will be failure because you are still going to be dooming people to second class status, second, third tier status, never to be expected to, access any way to become a successful citizen. So at the same time, it's going to make people resent people based on color. And, I thought we put that behind us with Martin Luther King Jr., who had moved the continuum of freedom, substantially forward in this country. But now here we are, where we are back to just simply judging people based on the content of not the content of the character, but the content of the mass of their melanin.
Well, Martin Luther King is anathema because he actually suggested a world without color. We know it is a foremost premise of critical race theory that race is all you are allowed to see. Take a look at some of the posts from this. This is Oak Park and River Forest High School in the Chicago area, and this is Strategic Plan Priority 2, quote, transformative education. And here are some of the examples. Traditional grading practices perpetuate inequity and intensify the opportunity gap. So actually grading kids on how they're doing in the classroom, making sure they're learned, that makes the gap worse. So we got to stop doing it.
Right. I used to think that equity, simply meant preference for certain groups based on their status as oppressed. And now I just think that equity means to permanently destroy opportunity for people who maybe come from challenged backgrounds or folks who, don't have the same sort of stability in family. And now I just think it's about masking racist hatred that the left has for anyone who doesn't look like them. This is, and I think that they not only mask the racist hatred, but I think they convince themselves that it's the exact opposite. This is the way the psychology of this works. You're going to tell yourself that you're doing something good and decent and virtuous, when really what you're doing is just simply hiding your own racism behind policies that will absolutely ensure that the people you claim to care about will fail. So, I mean, there's a twisted psychology here, but I honestly think that this is just the same old olive drab racism that we're used to from the Democrats going back to the Klan.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. After the break, we need to talk about the broader implications of this moving forward. We'll be right back. All right, we're back with Vicki McKenna and CultureCast. So, Vicki, we talked about this really ridiculous situation where black kids are literally being told, stop educating in the public schools because you can't compete with all these racist white kids who have all these advantages you don't, so stop. And what we're going to do is we're going to socially promote you, we're going to graduate you, we're going to send you off to college without any real achievements in the name of social justice. So where does this end, Vicki? I mean, you stop and think about it, because I can tell you this as a university
Civil War.
As a university professor, there is they are completely abetting this. They are taking these kids, even though they have no ability, they are bringing them to campus, they're giving them scholarships, they're giving them book allowances, they're giving them all sorts of financial aid, and then they're here, and then once they're here, you cannot fail them, you cannot refuse to promote them. So the universities are on board with us as well. And what about all those woke companies out there who seem to be suggesting that we don't care if your kids can read and write, if they're the right race, we're going to take them down the road?
Well, you know what, Duke, at the end of the day, they will care whether people can read and write, and they simply just won't hire black Americans, and depending upon how bad the education system does get, all Americans, they'll get H-1B visas and they'll fill the slots that way. The idea that, well, you know what, we'll absolutely promote someone who can't read, can't do math, doesn't know how to function in society, has been expected to be utterly functionally illiterate. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So what you're going to have is a bunch of people who are unmoored from any kind of scaffolding that allows them to build up enough skills so that they can be successful. And that creates, cognitive dissonance. That creates misery. That creates anger. That creates resentment. That sows the seeds for revolution, doesn't it? And isn't that maybe what we're ultimately looking at here? You're going to have resentment, racial resentment between whites and blacks, or Asians and blacks, or whoever and blacks, and so you're going to keep stoking that fire of racial resentment. At the same time, you're going to ensure that a population of people who have been essentially told to be illiterate, that to be illiterate is to be virtuous somehow. Well, that's going to be a recipe for failure, and that is going to create a massive amount of misery and disconnectedness, chaos and nihilism in that community. And so you're going to have racial hatred clashing with anger and resentment. And that is, tell me how that's not the seed for the revolution that the left claims that they ultimately want, to tear down all the structures, functional structures of American society, to be rebuilt in whatever kind of, Bolshevik tyranny they imagine is going to be the ultimate paradise.
When the book is finally written on what lost the United States to socialism, it will be this: that we were rather than being systemically racist, particularly white people, we were so afraid of race. We had been so treated and so beat down about race that we don't say anything, we don't intervene. When our own kids are being racialized in the schools, we say nothing. When the book is finally written, it will be using a made-up racial crisis to completely transform the nature of this country.
And create and institutionalize and permanently ensconce a violent hatred between people based on skin color, the exact opposite of what the civil rights movement was. But again, I think that's the point. And I think you really have to hate humanity. And you certainly have to hate black people to do this.
Yes, I agree. Take one last slide from what's coming, the next steps here at Oak Park and River Forest High School. The administration and faculty will examine grading reporting practices in academic and elective courses, utilizing evidence-backed research and the racial equity analysis tool. In other words, wherever there is a gap, even a slight one between a white student and a black or Hispanic one, that's systemic racism. That gap has to be artificially removed, not by actually teaching kids, but by simply adjusting the white kids down and the minority kids up.
You know what? This is another opportunity for us to say, get your kids out of this environment. There is no reason to send your kids to public school. You as a mom or as a dad in a library card are going to be better for your child and educating your child than any kind of environment like this will be. It is absolutely now, without question, that there is probably no hope of fixing these schools when they are willing to, in the face of this parent revolt of this past spring and all of the anger, the lawsuits, the exposure of DEI and CRT and the trans agenda, and what you have from the elites, the educrats, is to double down and triple down and rub your nose in it. There's no reason to keep your kids in these institutions. As I said, you and a library card are going to better educate your child than, the highest dollar private American educational institution, and certainly even much better than the high performing, whatever that means, public school institution. So homeschool your kids, figure out how to do it.
Yeah, one of the major takeaways from this conversation and this behavior from the public schools is the federal government, the Department of Education, the colleges, the universities, many of our corporations are standing firmly behind resegregation and refighting racial battles that were over 50, 60 years ago. That's what's coming. And again, not only do you have to pull your kids out of the public schools, we as Americans, particularly if you are not minorities, we have to no longer take seriously the trope of white supremacist. If we don't fight the idea that American culture is exclusively white supremacist, then they have a good justification for getting away from it. And
exactly.
And where are our churches? Where are our Republican politicians? Where are our so-called conservatives? No one's fighting that battle.